Okay, it's time, community. It's wonderful to be in dialogue with y'all again. This is one of those episodes where Jen and I are in two different locations, all for good reasons, but we're tag teaming a little bit. But right now, this is the part of tax season, tax prep. And for me, that means I'm down here in my office with multiple screens trying to get the last bit of the categorizations correct for all of our different thoughts on tax prep. But it also was a reminder as we were going through all this, and Dr. Jan and I were kind of talking through tax planning and financial planning, that we have touched on this idea at a high level, but we wanted to just give kind of five core thoughts for you all as you're getting into your financial planning and your tax planning around how to think about planning for longevity from a funding perspective. So, we've heard the stat, and the one that really catalyzes all of us is the idea that a 50-year-old today has a 50% chance of living to be more than 100. I think it's 114 was the last time I saw the data from the Cleveland Health Clinic. And I mean, it sounds exhausting. And how can we live to be 114? But some of those things are not going to be a choice. You just will be living that long. And so you want to really invest your time and energy to be enjoying living that long. And that requires having the funding to enjoy living that long. So we've heard that Cleveland healthcare stat, but then more recently, Social Security kind of came out and released data on what the expected age profile is for a Social Security person taking Social Security right now over the age of 65. You got to think it's going to be longer for those of us who are not yet 65, but over the age of 65, Social Security, I'm taking a look here, make sure I don't misquote this, estimates that the typical 65-year-old will live to be 83, but 1 in 4 will live to be older than 90. So 1 in 10 will live to be older than 95. So it's kind of the background for making sure we've planned our funding for that. So the thought to kind of take yourself through, and your life partner, if you're planning things in partnership together, is what do we really think is important for us to fund? Planning for longevity, it's not like the cohorts before us who maybe planned for 15 or 20 years of retirement. It's easily 30 years or 30 to 40 years of retirement, which is like putting your hat on when you were 20 and thinking about how you were going to fund between 20 and 60. You were working full throttle. That was most of the conversation that we were all thinking about in our 20s. So this is a different moment or a season in time where maybe you're not working full throttle, but you still need to be able to fund relatively full throttle. You might be moving the kids out of the equation, but moving in some other things like travel or healthcare. So when you're doing your financial planning, you're looking at that 30 to 40-year horizon when you're in a retired or semi-retired state. So the second thought is really kind of talking with your tax advisors and your financial planners about trying to do catch-up contributions if you haven't had a chance to fully contribute to your investment vehicles, your retirement funds, your IRAs, and your Roths, to take a look back at the horizon and see what your fully vested or fully contributed state would have been in each one of those funds, and then do a catch-up contribution. There is a cap to that each year. Talk to your tax accountant to get the right number. I mean, it's not like you can contribute 500,000 in a year. It's more like 50,000 at the cap, or even 32 to 33,000 based on what you've contributed to date. But it is a cash contribution strategy that you want to look at each year over the age of 50, because it compounds, right? And so it is an investment vehicle that can help you think through the expenses you're going to have after 65. And it just because you were in your 20s or your early 30s with a new family, or with a new career, didn't have the ability to contribute fully at that time, doesn't mean you can't catch up and do it now. So have that conversation with your financial planner. The third thing to really have top of mind is to think about your healthcare costs. So Dr. Jen and I have both talked about this in the context of helping our parents navigate this, but it is really a surprise. So that a couple of inputs to keep in mind. If you think about what is the overall cost of healthcare, I mean, that's kind of a crystal ball question. And of course, we're trying to drive it down, right? That's why we're doing all this longevity work. But the numbers say that a retiring couple at the age of 65 will likely need between $300,000 and $500,000 in medical costs, which to me is staggering. That's all of our kids' college educations combined. So why is that? We have insurance, we have Medicaid, we have Medicare, but the reality is that Medicare doesn't cover everything. Medicare covers a subset of things. And then, of course, Medicare and Medicaid are both in the defunding risk right now with what's happening in our national budget scale question. But even if you have Medicare in place and it stays in place, it doesn't cover things like certain pharmaceuticals, it doesn't cover, and it doesn't cover long term care. It doesn't cover a lot of out of pocket costs. Whatever, hopefully there's not a tragic event or a really big catalyst for a medical expense, but whatever does occur, Medicare is not 100% covering it. And so thinking about vehicles for medical expense savings, and there again, talk to your accountant, talk to your financial advisor. But there are vehicles for specifically for medical expense savings that are tax deferred so that you can be ready for any kind of medical expenses in the future. And then related to that, there are also vehicles if you're thinking about inheritance transfers with your family, your parents, or even for yourself with your children. There are vehicles that enable you to transfer wealth with a dedicated expense for medical expenses on behalf of the giftee. So again, lots of different mechanics and ways to structure that you want to talk with a financial advisor and an accountant about. But the idea of being forward thinking about the reality of medical costs, especially in the environment of living 30 or 40 more years, even with great longevity investment and time and energy that you're doing now, it's worth a conversation with your financial advisors about that. The fourth idea, when you think about trying to fund your back half or your high half, is around considering actively managing multiple income streams. And so what we mean by that is, Dr. Jen and I kind of framed this. It's like we have potentially Social Security, that's always a question mark as you get into the decades in the future. But right now you have Social Security, you have your retirement accounts, and we just, talked about trying to do catch-up contributions on those accounts so that you've got more cash flow from them in the years ahead with the compounding of those accounts. You've got Social Security and retirement accounts. And the third thing are whatever your investment strategies have been. So, just the conversation we're having, all of us with our kids about the compound effective interest and compound growth is trying to invest from early days into an investment account. That still holds for wherever you are right now. So investing in your investment accounts with an eye to a 10 to 30-year horizon is a third income stream. The fourth is rental income. Our parents' generation didn't really have access to something like an Airbnb or a Verbo or a long-term rental. I'm thinking about your house, especially as you're looking potentially at downsizing and looking at it as an option to either rent and have a rental income because you have such a low mortgage right now and a low mortgage rate, or if you try to trade out of it and get into a smaller context or a smaller living dynamic, also making sure that that is one that enables you to rent it as a nightly rental or a long-term rental if you're in the mode of travel or you're taking time off in your 60s or your 70s to go visit your children, take care of grandchildren, who knows. But all of those are options where you want to build in that flexibility, and rental income can be a key income, passive income stream for you in the 10 to 30 years ahead in the retirement phase. And then the last one, we talk a lot about being semi-retired or downshifting, but keeping kind of your hand in the pot a little bit so that you can continue to do your consulting work or some sort of an advising work that continues to have an income stream as well. Being thoughtful about that before you downshift or before you fully exit and do a retirement or semi-retirement structure. Being mindful about building that LLC so that you have that company and that tax base in place, and then shift into that consulting work and shift into that revenue stream is a great buffer for you as you're working through those extra decades and want to have good fun and access to fun as well. So that's the fourth idea, is thinking about proactively structuring multiple income streams as you get into those decades. And then the fifth idea is to take a look specifically at your investment portfolio and manage it for growth. Again, with the eye of 10 to 20 to 30 years, when you were in your 20s, or maybe in your 30s, if you had an investment portfolio, you probably had a higher risk profile and you were managing that portfolio for growth. And so this would be an invitation for you to take a look at a significant piece of your investment portfolio and just check in and see if you can take it and measure a chunk of it, if it's not all of it, with a growth strategy as well, with the mindset that you're going to be there and be in there for the 20 to 30 year horizon or 50-year horizon. It depends, what decades you want to be able to bet on. But A lot of people shift in their 50s and 60s into a very conservative investment strategy, which might make sense if you were just going to live until you were 70. And we don't have any crystal balls, but if you're trying to plan for being able to be active and adventurous and do the things that are on your hopes and dreams list, then it's trying to generate income in that 20 to 30-year horizon through that investment account as well. So having that conversation with your financial advisors. So this is just a quickie to encourage us all to take a minute. When we go through our tax planning, it's always a catalyst to look back at your year before and think a little bit about the year as you're in it, Q1, or you're already in it and planning, but to think about it more and more with the eyes of a 30 to 40-year horizon, and having that 30 to 40-year horizon be one that you're enjoying and you're funding the things that you want to get out and do. So this is just one of our quickies as we're on the eve of tax planning for all of us and tax filing for all of us, to think about your financial plan with an eye to all of the great adventures that you have ahead. So thanks for the quick time on this It's Time episode, and we'll look forward to diving into some of our interviews on longevity experts, as well as thinking about how do you look at that work that you might do for that consulting income stream, or going back to work with a different time commitment than you did in the first half of your career. We'll talk about a little bit about that in the episodes ahead. Thank you.